The federal government has said that it will eliminate all terrorists by December this year. The Minister of Interior, Rauf Aregbesola, said this in Abuja yesterday during a joint security press conference with Ministers of Defense, Information and Police Affairs, as well as the Chief of Defense Staff. According to the minister, security agencies were working to eliminate, in quotes, those causing violent attacks in the country, with December as the deadline. This was just as Information and Culture Minister Lai Mohammed said terrorists and bandits were now on the run over the superior firepower from the country's armed forces. Joining us now from our Abuja studio on the federal government's December deadline for eliminating terrorism in Nigeria is Major General Henry Idowu Ayoola, retired, former commander, Special Task Force Operation Safe Haven, which covered Plateau and parts of Bauchi State. Good morning, sir. Welcome to the show.
Good morning, Tudun. Thank you for having me. Good day, viewers.
Well, thank you, General, for joining us. Very quickly, the Minister of Interior and the Minister of Information and the Minister of Defense and Minister of Police Affairs, they were telling Nigerians this week that the worst in terms of insecurity is over. How? Are they right? And they've been given orders, they told us, by the President to crush terrorism by December. Is that realistic? What do you think?
Thank you very much, Dr. Abati. Well, as an optimist, I know perpetual optimism is a force multiplier. That's a quote by Colin Powell. Is a good way to, to set a target. There's nothing wrong in setting a target. Targets have a way of motivating the people towards its achievement and towards peak performance. So I guess it will achieve that much. But if I look back to some of the lessons learned from war history in particular, hardly has it ever happened in the history of war. Almost invariably, I think the shortest war, and I'm not sure if anybody actually predicted, the war on the large scale, that's the Gulf War, was about the shortest war in terms of how long it took to implement and to bring it to a decisive end. But usually, it's a good thing coming from the strategic level, and with that extraordinary collection of the ministers and the Chief of the Defense Staff himself being there. Obviously, they must have gotten some situation reports and an update on the state of the nation from the Chief of Defense Staff before coming to that kind of conclusion. But I know by the vagaries and the vicissitudes and the uncertainties about war, you hardly has anybody ever predicted precisely how long it will take to conclude any war. But like I said, it's an optimistic posture. It's good. It will also help to motivate the troops to know that they have a deadline given, and so they can do all the, within their power to bring the war to a favorable conclusion to Nigeria. But if I go nitty-gritty to that statement, the mention was just about terrorism. What about the insurgency? And what about, because terrorism is in itself is broad, but it's not all encompassing in our own situation, because we know the challenges that we have. Started majorly with insurgency, then terrorism as a tool, as a means to an end. But terrorism in itself is not an end state. I mean, it's a means to an end. Therefore, we have the banditry, which is another dimension entirely, that has involved, kidnapping, hostage taking, and ransom, and all of that. Is it the totality of this that the minister was referring to, or we're just talking about the aspect of terrorism? We need to clarify that. Only then can one make any informed conclusion or even analysis about the statement. But let me look at it a little broader. Since the last extraordinary meeting of the National Security Council, Remember after the incident where soldiers of 7th Gas Battalion were killed, and that statement from the presidency that talk about full freedom being given to the services and all the security, services and the entire sector. Now, that for me was a turning point for the nation. From that point, it means it was up to the service chiefs. That means they had the freedom, full freedom. Of course, how full that freedom too needs to be interrogated because, of course, it's a loaded statement in itself. Because that means they didn't really have full freedom before that time. But if you follow what has been happening since then, I was very optimistic about it. I remember I was on one other platform in which I said that I underlined the two words, full freedom. And sincerely, I've been vindicated because since then our troops have been doing fantastically on the northeast front with the insurgency, both with Boko Haram and ISWAP, in the northwest, generally in all the internal security operations against banditry. The Air Force have been having very successful raids, sniffing them out from their sanctuaries and safe havens. We've been having series of victories, on the northeast flank. And I think those are very, very, they portend a very good success as far as I'm concerned. So maybe premised on that, series of victories, that's how they arrived at that conclusion. And that's rightly so. But of course, for me, for the military in particular, to deal with the insurgency and of course, this other parts, terrorism and banditry and all of that, decisively to deter, defeat, and destroy, and eventually decimate the forces that are involved, we need to do more than we've been doing before. Even now, having the full freedom, do we have all the resources, the services, have all, there's what we call battle space awareness, improved battle space awareness, which is something that enhances an enabler to help, the military to succeed in their operations. We need to work on that. We need to produce all the military technologies that are applicable in our setting, this peculiarity of this environment, and see how that will help to catalyze the success we're looking for. We need to also look at even logistics and the area of improving the welfare of the troops. I know the Chief of Defense Staff and the services have been working so hard on that. So we need to give all the resources, all the support that will help them to meet that deadline. Of course, if we do all that, if we increase, if there are sensors in the field, if the officers and men have all of course not having or at least have sufficient resources that they require to get the work done, then of course that deadline can be met. So it's not overambitious, provided these necessary supports are made available to the troops. That's what I would say for now.
Thank you for that, General. Really useful analysis there. But the opacity might be deliberate so that the narrative can be controlled when we're talking about a deadline with regards to terrorism as opposed to insurgency, like you said, or any of the other insecurity issues that we're facing. But if we're looking at a holistic view of the state of insecurity in Nigeria, what is your prognosis? If December is not possible to curb that, when do you think? How long will that fight take? Because we still have Nigerians being held in forests all over the country. People still cannot travel freely with any form of confidence, and there are pockets of violence across the country. Recently, we had this awful report of a murder massacre that occurred in a mosque while still reeling from the Owa Church massacre. So Nigerians can't even do something as basic as worship with any form of confidence.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm sure we all recall the last, the Chief of Army Staff, when the service chiefs were changed in the beginning of the year, and when I think they had a kind of tete-a-tete with the National Assembly. And will I say prophesy, or he was giving us his own prognosis and said that it will take about 20 years to end insurgency. I'm sure we recall that. I just don't want to call the name, but we recall that statement. And sometimes, I mean, we all watch football. Maybe the most pedestrian illustration I can use is that of football match. Sometimes those of us who are spectators, who are not in the field, we see some things that the players on the field don't see. Because of course the player on the field is engrossed with, passing the ball, controlling the ball, and trying to, score a goal. Or in the midst of doing that, he's not likely to see something that's happening maybe in the goalpost behind him and things like that. So sometimes you find that people sitting as spectators sometimes see some things that the players don't see. I guess that was what perhaps happened, that after immediately he left office, he began to see differently. Okay, so if you juxtapose that with this, I know, of course, like I said, there has been a change. And I would rather put it in a more cautious way, like I would say that we should expect all that is possible to be done at once, and the seemingly impossible will take a little while. I mean, that's a general statement that people make here and there. Of course, it carries with it the optimism and the necessary motivation to get the work done, but giving room for what we call the fog of war in military parlance, and the other vagaries and the other uncertainties, like I mentioned earlier, so that, because sometimes when you set targets and your target is too high and you don't meet the target, it also has a possibility of dampening morale. So both must be weighed. There must be a balance between a time, set and the reality of what is on the ground and how long it will take to get the work done. Usually for any higher commander that is giving missions or aim at the grand strategic level, usually at the grand strategic level, you hardly give timing, because you leave that flexibility to the military strategic level, where the service chiefs and the field commanders can now deal with the nitty-gritties of timing and what it takes to get the work done. So that's what I would say, because okay, if you look at all the operations from Hadinkai, Haridin Daji, Swell Stroke, Swell Punch, all the Delta Save, Safe Haven, all of these operations are all happening concurrently and more. Okay, and like I said, where we're seeing some good promise in the northeast, northwest, but like you rightly said, in the south, where these bandits have occupied forests and driven people off their farms and taking over some settlements and all of that, there's still so much work to be done in those areas. And of course, I'm also aware that there are operations going on even in the south, southwest and southeast and all of that. So if we put all that together, this is September. December is just 3 months away. Okay? I think, well, there is no harm in setting a goal and not meeting it, as long as it helps you to retrace and review appropriately to know how much effort needs to be put into the work to get it done. Nothing spoiled. That's how I will look at it.
Okay, General, it's always a pleasure to see you once again. General, good to see you. I'd like to ask, in military speak,
thank you.
Are there empiricals? I mean, because I've had my own fair bit of study about wars with the likes of Clausewitz and the likes, Are there empiricals? And when you see other wars, you see some level of empiricals there, like certain percentage wins. So can we put empiricals on this war? Because I believe what you don't put empiricals around, then you don't have in the first place. And that's why we've just been going around in circles for about 10 years since we started this. Secondly, can a lot of conversation also be had as regards funding, and which funding might not necessarily be through the electronic system of funding, but now I'm talking about hand-to-hand funding. Take, for instance, people that carry hard currencies in the forest, cash at hand and things like that. How can we block those loopholes? Camelback funding. That's another conversation I want to have. And also the third aspect is also the destruction and disruption of the economy of war. Because you cannot you can't remove all of this from the economy of war that have been built around there. And what we talk about when we say things like the economy of war and military and industrial complex.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Rufai. Yeah, you've opened up the space, and I love that. That's a very wonderful question, because when we look at the entire gamut, the full spectrum of war, not just the kinetic aspect that we've been focusing on. I remember on this platform, I talked about several papers that have been written about finding solutions to these security challenges. And I made reference to the particular one I wrote, where I did a profiling of Boko Haram in particular, in ISWAP. And I said there were 8 S's that are the components involved in the entire scenario. And I also remember I said then that so far, in all that we have done, we have dealt with just about 2 components out of the 8. So I think the state we are in now, with the full freedom given to the services, I think it's a good time to go back and look at some of those papers that have been written, some of those suggestions and recommendations, and see which of them we can bring to the table for implementation at a time like this. Because, like you rightly said, you were looking for empirical. I said in the beginning that almost invariably will you find in the history of war where any prediction made by a war commander or by the national grand strategic level was actually met accurately that way. Let's give some examples so that will satisfy the empirical details. Let's even go back to our own civil war. If you remember, one of the commanders said that the civil war was going to be a 48 hours police action. That was at the beginning of the civil war, 48 hours police action to enforce law and order. And that ended us with a 30-month civil war. Okay? Now, the example of the Gulf War that I gave, which is one of the very rare examples where war was concluded in such a short time, of course, it's so different compared with what we have here, because we are talking about 26 allied nations coming together. These are nations that are almost at par civilization-wise, and the level of their military technology, were comparative, and then about 26. That's those who even contributed troops. There were other advanced nations that contributed logistics without boots on ground and all of that. And with all that, from August 2nd, 1990 to February 1991 when the war ended, that's how short. But you see there, you see a deployment of overwhelming force. Iraq didn't stand a chance with that, conglomeration of forces. That's a typical example of an overwhelming superior force coming against one nation, which does not even belong to the class of those 26 allied nations, in terms of military technology, advancement, and all of that. So, of course, one can understand why that was so concluded so swiftly. If you remember, I think it was 72 hours land operation that took place. Most of the operation was air bombardment, precision guided munition. Of course, we saw it as an opportunity to bring new weapons, which of course some of these countries were itching to test over time. You remember the Scud missile and the Patriot missile that countered it, and all of that. So that's an example that is far-fetched compared with what we are dealing with here. What we are dealing with, belongs to the realm of asymmetric warfare, or even if you take it in the full spectrum of hybrid warfare. The other components, apart from the asymmetric, are in small snippets here and there. So we don't have that a similar setting. Another example is General William Slim. When he took over the African front, he made a statement. He said, "I will do all that is possible at once. The impossible will take a little longer." That obviously he was not the first person saying that, but he was applying it to the issue of war. That's a very safe way to put it, without being definitive, without putting a time frame on when a war will end. Okay, so I think for me, it's just good to tread cautiously, optimistically, yes, but cautiously. And that we do it. Of course, there's so much work to be done. And like you talked about the economy of war, if you come to the area of banditry, for example, where we know that the bandits are making so much money, and that even if you have a non-kinetic program to help resettle them, the booties they are getting right now, I don't think there's any program you can come up with that will equal what they are getting, what they are making right now. So we need to go back to the drawing table to think of a kind of holistic solution that will replace what they have, and of course leave them with no choice, because it's not going to perhaps happen voluntarily. If you put them under pressure sufficiently, like you begin to see after that statement of full freedom, you notice that we're getting feedback that some of the bandits were now asking for amnesty and negotiations and all that, because they were under the heat. So the heat was on them, and hence they saw that, look, this thing won't work any further. Now, if we perpetuate that over time, then we can begin to throw at them some non-kinetic solution for which they will have no choice at that point. But then we will have demonstrated an overwhelming force, leaving them with no choice to know that, look, it's either they die or they take this option. Until we get to that point. And that has to be done deliberately. We have to have a stack of operations that will be serialized, either as serial operation or parallel operation, to put that pressure until there is a concentration of force that will leave them with no choice at all. That also we need deliberate planning, and of course having all the resources that can help you to do that. So that's what I would say about that.
Okay, General, two quick things. In the course of this conversation, you've mentioned so many operations. And, many Nigerians are intrigued by the title of those operations. Operation Adarin Daji, Operation Thunder Strike, Operation Cobra Dance, Operation Python Smiling, and all of that. Where do these labels come from? Is it just, for fancy purposes, or they hold any significant meaning within the military? Because, I find them attractive, but what do they really mean in real terms? Now, this same week that you have, the ministers assuring Nigerians that by December, terrorism will have been crushed, we also had the intelligence agencies meeting at the headquarters of the Department of State Security, looking at the issue of terrorism financing and trying to see how they can cut off, the lifeline to terrorists through intelligence, through collaboration. How important is that? And why are we just talking about it now, at this point?
Thank you so very much. And thank you for keeping tab, because bringing that to the fore really goes to support the point I made about the remaining six S's in my profile. And of course, that actually addresses one of them. The issue of sponsors, is one of the 8 S's. So it's good that the government is doing this now. Like you rightly say, well, maybe it will have come earlier, it will have been better, but it's better late than never. So let's work with it and face that aspect of it, because unless you deal with this issue holistically, taking all the 8 S's are the components of this problem, the kinetic side alone will not get the problem solved. So it's a good thing, and we need to commend the government for doing that and taking that step now, and then for them to get all the help. But let me go back to our operational names. I'm sure, Dr. Abati, you want to become a general also. Very, very soon, by the time you know all of this. Anyway, it's a military tradition. Usually every operation is named. It's given a name. I mean, if you go as back as even the Napoleonic Wars, every operation is given a name. And usually, except in very rare cases, usually 2 words, 2 separate words. What we call is a nickname in the military parlance, given to an operation, okay? And usually decided by whoever is in charge. You will remember that. Let's go back to the Northeast. You remember when it started, it was a joint task force operation, Restore Hope. Yeah, it was Hope, or it was Delta that was Restore Hope. It was Restore, yeah, I think it was Restore Hope, if I remember. And then it came from that when, with the change of one chief of army staff, they changed it to Lafia Dole. No, in fact, before Lafia Dole, it was something Lafia. I can't recall it all now. So there were successive changes based on the new chief. So when a new chief came, it changed from Lafia, something Dole, something Lafia, Operation Lafia. something Lafia. Then he changed to Lafia Dole. I think it was General Burantai that changed to Lafia Dole. Then when another chief came, he changed from Lafia Dole to Hadinkai. So you find that with different changes in command, the names, the aim of names given to operation is sometimes to imbue some confidence, boost the morale of the troops. It actually also is like a vision statement. You know, it has a way of energizing the troops to get the work done. For example, moving from Lafia Dole to Hadinkai. Hadinkai actually means cooperation. Lafia Dole means peace by all means. Peace by every means. So you see, it drives, you know, the troops in a way. When he has told that, oh, well, whatever you were doing before, now you must achieve this peace by all means. That's what it means. Okay. But when Hadinkai came, he brought to the fore the need for jointness among the services. Okay. So the issue of cooperation was emphasized. And we have seen the benefits of that, you know. Of course, there were allegations about, some difference. Of course, it has always happened in all wars, even in the Second World. I remember General Eisenhower, talked about that too. He said if the military had fought the army as much as they fought the navy, then the Second World War would have been won far much earlier than it did. So it has always been in wars. But Hadinkai was good in the sense that it brought to the fore the need for cooperation among all the services. In fact, it goes beyond jointness now. It goes to unified force, because then apart from the armed forces, there are also paramilitary agencies that were involved or that are even still involved. So working together as a team is emphasized. And we have seen that it has paid off. You see how the Air Force operations are very well, in tandem with the land operations and all of that. And it's working for us. And I think it's a good thing.
Well, thank you.
I don't know if I've satisfied your curiosity on that.
Fair enough. Thank you very much, General Ayoola, for joining us on the morning show. Thank you very much indeed.